If you ever notice that thing where, like, it's not even the danger itself, but it's the people just kind of frozen.
Yeah.
During a crisis, it's like their brains are stuck on pause and everyone else is just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today. Like, what is up with that reaction? It's called the bystander effect, right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It really is.
So we're going to get into all that, why it happens, what we could do about it, and how this whole thing is playing out now that everyone's online all the time.
Right. It's funny, you'd think, like, instinct would be to jump in and help, but
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
that's not always the case.
Not even close. And the case that always comes to mind is that really awful one, Kitty Genevieve's, back in 1964. I mean, the media at the time, they kind of blew the whole thing out of proportion, but
Right.
it still showed us something really unsettling about, like, how people act, or don't act, I guess, when something terrible's happening.
Yeah, and so many people, they saw parts of what happened, but nobody. It took way too long for anyone to do anything. It's like, how? And that's what got researchers, really digging into why people hesitate to help in emergencies. Like, what's the psychology there?
Okay, so what'd they find? After decades of research, is there like a clear-cut answer for why we do this?
Well, at its core, the bystander effect is this. The more people around when something bad's going down, the less likely any single person is to do anything.
Ah,
It's like this weird math equation almost. Responsibility divided by a crowd somehow equals zero responsibility.
you'd think more people would equal more help.
You'd assume. But nope. Often the more the merrier does not apply to emergencies.
Right, right.
It's rarely just apathy, though. People aren't necessarily being jerks. It's more that our brains get stuck. Assuming someone else will step up, especially when it's not super clear what's even happening.
So it's like we're all secretly hoping someone else will be the hero.
In a way, yeah. Two researchers, Latani and Darley, they were pioneers in this area, bystander effect, and they found these two major things at play. Diffusion of responsibility, and then this other thing, social influence.
Okay, break those down for me. What does this even mean?
Okay, so picture this. Someone trips and falls on a busy street. Your brain might go, well, someone else already called 911, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's diffusion of responsibility. The more people around, the less urgent it feels to personally act.
Like it's not all on me to do something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, social influence, that's where we're looking to everyone else, seeing how they're reacting, to decide if we should even be worried.
Ah, okay.
So if everyone else is just chilling, walking by,
We're probably not going to be the one freaking out.
our brain's like, don't be that guy, even if that guy is the one who's actually got to make the call.
It's like we get caught in this loop. Everyone's looking to everyone else. And because of that, nothing happens.
Exactly that. And unfortunately, this inaction, it's not just in those big life or death moments. It creeps into our everyday lives more than we realize, which we'll get into.
It's kind of wild when you think about it, that even when we want to help, like we have good intentions and all, our brains can be like, nope, not your job.
It's true. And it's not just like a hunch or whatever. There's actual science behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of the articles, Brain Food, it breaks down how we make decisions in these situations, or how we don't make decisions. And they say there are 5 main steps.
5 steps. All right, now I got to know. Lay it on me.
Yeah.
What are the 5 steps to not being a bystander?
Well, picture this, right? You see someone, they're being harassed out on the street. Happens all the time, unfortunately. First step is just noticing it. Sounds obvious, right?
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
so distracted these days, easy to miss things.
True. I'll admit I've been guilty of being glued to my phone and missing stuff. But, okay, so say you do see something's up. Then what?
Then, step 2, you got to figure out, is this actually an emergency? And that's where those social cues we were talking about, they come in.
Right.
Like, are these friends just messing around, or is someone actually in trouble? If everyone else is just walking on by like nothing's wrong.
Our brains are like, must be fine.
Exactly. No need to get involved. But all right, let's say you've passed levels 1 and 2 here, right?
Oh,
Step 3, that feeling of responsibility, gotta have it. But that's tough because,
because if you're the only one who sees it, you're the only one who can do something.
right, exactly. But put yourself in a crowd, suddenly everyone shares that burden and it's like it disappears.
Weird how that works.
Yeah, brains are strange. But even if you do feel responsible, step 4 is a doozy. Believing you can actually help. Like, do you have the skills, the knowledge? Can you even physically do something safely?
And that's where the self-doubt kicks in, right? Like, what if I make it worse? What if I get hurt?
Totally normal to think that. Most of us aren't, like, trained superheroes. Those what ifs, they hold us back. Okay, finally, step 5. If you've made it this far, actually deciding to do something.
Which, by that point, your brain is probably screaming at you about all the ways it could go wrong.
Yeah,
It's like we're wired to overthink and then just do nothing.
that's one way to put it. And brain food. They point out these 3 big reasons why people don't help. We talked about the first one, diffusion of responsibility, the whole someone else will deal with it thing.
The bystander's motto. Okay, so what are the other two? What else is stopping us from, being decent human beings?
Number 2 is evaluation apprehension. Basically, it's being scared of what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
What if I look dumb? What if I freeze up? What if everyone judges me for getting it wrong?
Ah, the old spotlight effect. Suddenly you're on stage and everyone's staring. Not ideal.
Nope. And lastly, we've got pluralistic ignorance, that feeling of nobody else is worried, so I must be tripping, right?
So we're all just looking around at each other like, should we be doing something?
Yeah.
But nobody wants to be the first one to react.
A recipe for everyone doing absolutely nothing. Yep.
And probably not for the first time. This bystander effect thing, it's not just those crazy headline news situations, is it?
Oh, not at all. It pops up way more than we realize. Everyday stuff, at work,
Yeah.
even online. Speaking of...
It's funny you say that about it being everywhere. Because, yeah, we think about those big emergencies, but I don't, have you ever, seen someone drop their groceries and there's that pause where you're like, should I? Do I?
Oh, all the time. Like that awkward, do I help? Is it weird if I help?
Exactly. And then it gets even more complicated because then there's the legal stuff, right?
Oh,
On
yeah.
one hand, you want to help. It's the right thing to do. But then it's like, what if I get sued?
It's a real dilemma, that's for sure. It's like our morals are telling us one thing, but the law is this whole other can of worms. Like, Good Samaritan law is right. They're supposed to protect you if you're helping someone, but even those are tricky.
It's a minefield out there for just trying to be a good person. One of the articles, it had this thing about an EMT, and they were saying how it's frustrating because people are so worried about legal trouble that they don't even do basic first aid anymore.
Yeah, it's sad. And that's a perfect example of how sometimes just knowing what could happen legally is enough to stop people from doing anything at all, even if they have the best intentions. But I will say, this whole bystander effect, it's not just the real world. The online world is a breeding ground for this stuff.
Oh, 100%. If anything, it's worse online. It's like
Yeah.
we're all bystanders by default. You see a million things every day, news, people's posts, calls for help. But it's so easy to feel like you're just one person.
Absolutely. And Brain Food, one of the articles we read, they made this point that I thought was really interesting. They said, online, you're always in a crowd. Every time you're scrolling, it's like being surrounded by people? And when you feel anonymous like that, well, your sense of responsibility kind of goes out the window.
And then there's that whole thing, right? Like, is scrolling past something bad? Is that the same as looking away in person?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is it apathy, or is it just that we're so overwhelmed with information all the time? And then you get
Yeah.
into the algorithms and all that. It's a mess.
Makes you think, are those like buttons and online petitions actually helping? Or are they just making us feel like we did something when really we just clicked a button and moved on?
Big questions, no easy answers. But here's the good news. Once you know about these psychological traps, you can start to fight back against them. We can train ourselves to be more active bystanders, both online and off.
Okay, so how do we do that? Give me the cheat codes for being a better human.
Here's a big one. Act like you're the only person who sees it happening. I know, it sounds simple, but it's not always easy to do, right? But if you can block out the crowd mentally, that helps with that diffusion of responsibility thing.
So don't look around to see how everyone else is reacting. Just trust your gut.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of just saying something, "Are you okay? I'm calling for help." Sometimes that's all it takes to break everyone else out of it, too.
You become the permission slip for everyone to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And even if it's small, sometimes taking charge is all it takes.
For sure. And, empathy, it's a superpower. Take a second to really put yourself in the other person's shoes. That connection, it can spark that instinct to help.
True, it's a lot harder to ignore someone's pain when you actually see yourself in their place. Powerful stuff.
Totally. And that's the key takeaway here. It's not just about knowing what the bystander effect is. It's about really understanding how our social wiring, all that psychology, it can lead to inaction, even when we don't want it to.
This deep dive has really made me think about, how we react in these situations. And not always in a good way, honestly.
And that's okay. That's kind of the beauty of digging into this stuff. Because if you
Yeah.
think about it, that the bystander effect, it reminds us that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply not be a bystander. When you see something big or small, you've got a choice.
That's a call to action disguised as a psych lesson. I love it. So to everyone listening, next time you're in that situation, remember this. Remember what we talked about. Just be present, say something, and choose to do something instead of nothing. You never know how much of a difference you might make.